You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
I'm joined now in studio by Toddy Byrne of Southern Wind and Solar. Start off by telling me how you became involved in the whole renewable energy sector, please, Toddy.
What I'd say is I hear people talking a lot about entrepreneurship going on, and I think from my own point of view, I've tried many different things, I can assure you, up to this stage in my life. And about 10 to 12 years ago, I've always had an eager eye to watch what's going on in the future of business and so on. And I just had this thought that the crisis and the global crisis that we were looking at that stage, in my mind, was a fuel crisis and an energy crisis. At that time, nobody even thought that there was an issue, I suppose, into relation to that, except the powers that may be. But I took a view of it and I said, well, I'd like to do my little thing here. So I got involved in it initially on a personal level. And, as time went on, I looked at, well, there was a possibility there was a business growing here as well. And I suppose little to our mind did we realise what was going to happen in the last 10 years. And we look at where we are today.
So, Toddy, I know that your own company specialises in wind and solar photovoltaic technologies. Most people would be familiar with, let's say, solar thermal, as in the solar panels that they would see on people's roofs out there, especially of homes today. They'd be quite a common sight. But tell me, what exactly is solar photovoltaic technology?
Solar photovoltaic technology is nothing new. It's been around for many years, but I think it's probably quite new to the Irish market. Awareness would be the issue there. If you interview a lot of people and you ask them about solar panels, the first thing they consider is that a solar panel heats water, and that's the first thing that strikes us. But this unique product has been there, and what it does basically is it generates electricity. So it's completely different by comparison to a solar thermal panel.
Now, as you say there, lots of people out there today would think that from a solar perspective, we don't get the sunlight to actually drive these panels to give us the return that we need. What are your thoughts on that?
There's a lot of academics would argue that point, but I guess I've been involved in it for so long. I talk about the equipment as we've seen it working. I think what you've got to look at here is the solar irradiation figures here in Ireland. And if you look at Ireland on the whole, it doesn't actually come up so bad. Indeed, if you look at Rosslare, you're looking at about 1,200 kilowatt hours per metre square per year availability from solar irradiation. So if your product that you're using can actually take a reasonable percentage of that power and convert that into useful energy, the figures here actually stack up. Believe it or not, we're as good as North France, and that's not something that people would actually believe. So it is there, and as I say, the common question I get, people say, does it work in the winter time? Well, actually it does. And if you look at the annual rate of production from these products, it actually stacks up very well. And as I say, and I've said just briefly before, with the price of the products declining, it's becoming affordable, and it's now making more common sense to install because its production values, because of the price of energy increasing, it's starting to make a lot more sense to install.
And what's driving the price of the products down?
I believe it's the market really, and it's the market globally, and I suppose it's like everything these days. We're looking at mass production as well. We're looking at the huge factories that are developing this product, and whether they're designed and manufactured in Europe or whether they're actually coming in from outside of Europe, there's a huge global market now for these manufacturers at this stage. And it's gone past the point of trying to sell something if it doesn't make viable sense, and they know that too. So what you're going to see now happening is the price has been pushed down. There's a huge global opportunity for these manufacturers to sell these products. So they're now competing with one another. You're not now anymore dealing with 6 or 8 contenders in the market, but there's a lot of new contenders in the market, and a lot of new contenders now coming in from countries like the likes of Korea, who are also building good products, and what it's doing is putting pressure on other manufacturers to keep the price down, which is very good for the consumer.
I know that one of the main criticisms of solar thermal products across Ireland over the last number of years is the amount of poor products that have been sold in the Irish market. I suppose mainly because Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland haven't put the standards at a high enough level for products to become listed. Is that becoming an issue for solar PV also? It might become an issue for solar PV. I guess we're kind of in its infancy as an industry in Ireland at the present moment. In the UK, things have been viewed a bit different because they've brought in what they call over there an MCS certification system, whereby a product has to meet a certain criteria before it's allowed to be sold on the market. And I think we probably would indeed need a similar event to that happening over here, because the last thing that people want when they're spending their good money is to end up with a product that's not successful at generating power. So I think that there is a view of that there. And then the other side of the industry is that the people who are handling the product should at least have a very good knowledge of how it works, and particularly from an installation point of view. So again, that the customer gets what it says on the tin. That's the important part. From a solar PV perspective, is it a more suitable technology for residential or commercial clients?
Well, I think there's a mixture of both here, really, because if you look at the price, every product, indeed, that I would look at, and I do a lot of, quotations these days for people who are concerned about their energy bills. So the product is installed based around the amount of consumption that's happening. So the amount of energy basically that's being used, whether it be commercial or residential. Really, the price it's got to a point where it's almost sold by the watt or by the kilowatt, if you look at it that way. And whether you're residential or not, it's still as good a value if you look at it from that point of view.
Just 2 points in relation to that. If, for instance, somebody was to install a solar PV system, would they be able to get 100% of their electricity requirement from it? And secondly, what would you be looking at an average payback time for that system today?
Certainly, there's not an issue to generate enough power that you require. The only issue that actually arrives is, do you have the space on your roof to actually install the equipment? And there is currently there's a X amount of square meters required for X amount of power, as we can imagine. But I think in most of our homes these days, most of us have a south-facing roof, and most of us have a reasonable size roof. And what I'd say, even if we just talk about a residential situation at the moment, most people's, I think, average electricity bills, from what I hear, seem to be coming in today at 200, 300 euro, maybe less. It depends, right? So it depends on how good these people are, how energy efficient their houses are, and so on. And most roofs will have enough space to generate probably in the region of 70 to 80% of the required needs. Now, that's a quite high figure to actually talk about. Now, of course, that depends again on the budget they have to input into the product as well, because whether they have the money to spend or not. But one thing I will say about the product is this: it's modular, and that means that for whatever affordability that you have at the moment to input into it, you can add on. And there's not many products like that, but with photovoltaic PV you can do that. So you can look at it as whatever you have at a budget price today, and you can add on later. And so what you're actually doing then is you're protecting yourself from the huge energy prices that are going to be coming our way. And I don't think I have to tell our listeners that here today. We see it already, that's happening, and it's protection. So I think it's a wonderful investment at the moment. And I don't say that because we're in business and people might say, oh, well, he's selling it, that's fine. But I really mean, because I have my heart in this, for more than just business perspective. I've done it. I took the plunge many years ago. And we've seen the fruits of it, I suppose, at this stage in time. But I'm saying to people out there at the moment, there are people, they have they've got a few quid put by. They're worried about their future. They're worried about their retirement and so on. And the energy thing is one of the things that are going to be eating into our pockets every day from here on in. So it's a great place to protect your money. And you know something? It's almost a good pension policy. And to answer the second question about the payback time on the product, at the moment we're probably looking somewhere in the region. Now, again, it will depend on the brand. It depends on the amount, of money that you've spent on the overall kit. But for good quality gear, and I would say to people, if you're purchasing this product, buy the good quality gear, the one that lasts. Because first and foremost, if something lasts for 20, 25, 30 years, as they expect from this product, without any problems, that's key to part of its payback. And then we're looking at, the overall cost versus its production value. And at the moment, I'd say we're looking at somewhere between 8 and 10 years payback on the product.
You mentioned there, Toddy, that, when somebody is choosing a product, they should look for a quality product. Most of our listeners today, like myself, wouldn't be familiar with what to go looking for in terms of how to identify a good product from a bad product. What advice would you give to our listeners in respect of that?
Well, first and foremost, I would probably say to look at the manufacturers and actually maybe how long they've been in business. I think from what I've learned over the years in many walks of life, it's very hard to beat some of the manufacturers that have been around for a number of years, because they've put a lot of money and time and effort into their product to get it to where it is today, whether it be through marketing and whether it be through the actual quality of the product and so on. So we'd be very conscious and careful of that. There are a lot of products coming into the market today. People are hung up by price sometimes, and we can understand that. And the worrying thing about buying photovoltaic is it is generally sold by, like I said, by the watt or the kilowatt, because this is the way it's sold. So you don't really view the brand maybe and its efficiency and its longevity and so on and so forth. And particularly if you're living coastal. A lot of people live coastal, and you've got to be very careful about the quality of even the bracketry of this product when they go out there. Because if you live in coastal, you have corrosion issues and so on. So the simplest thing in the world, you might overlook it, you're still spending quite a lot of money. And I've seen these products going out, and if I just was to say something to you, let's say somebody was investing 6,000 or 8,000 euro on a very nice, decent kit. If you actually look at the comparison of price of a top brand versus a cheaper brand, less efficiency and so on, there mightn't be €1,000 in the difference of the product. And what you're going to find long term is that €1,000 you didn't save it, really, because you're looking at long-term problems possibly affected in the system, particularly in the electronic side of it. So I would advise people strongly, do their homework, don't rush into the product, talk to people who know about and have been there. And I'm sure there's quite a lot of people out there now at this stage who are getting involved in the industry. Huge opportunity here, right across for the whole of Ireland here, for whether it be electricians, whether it be roofers, because remember we have a broad spectrum of work involved here in the installations of these things. So you talk to the people who you're confident with, and I think that's an important issue.
One of the queries I have in relation to the technology, it sounds great. Why hasn't there been a faster take-up across the country in respect of it?
Well, certainly awareness would have to be the top answer for that, although there are other things involved. But awareness particularly, I mean, how many people today listening to us have now realised you can generate electricity from a solar panel? And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there are probably saying, God, we never heard this before. But that is the case, and I believe I think that our authorities, whether it be SEAI or whoever, I think they need to do a lot here in this area to make awareness to people that you can produce electricity by solar. And the second thing would be to say that initially that the cost of the product, it didn't make viable sense. Today it's totally different because you're looking at the costs in probably 2 years now, and that's not that long ago. The costs of the product are halved.
Is the government giving any support in relation to homeowners or businesses to install these products?
Well, unfortunately not. And what we've seen, and we have fought hardly, I can assure you, from our own business point of view over the years, initially to even get grid connection was quite difficult. But now, to be fair to Electric Ireland there isn't a problem getting connection. There is limitations, but there isn't a problem. The problem that we're having with it is that the tariff, now the tariff, for people who don't know what a tariff may mean, the tariff is about what the costs of the energy actually is per unit or kilowatt hour of electricity. So whilst you may be overproducing power, and isn't that an incredible thing to say, that you're producing more than you're using, that power will be exported into the national grid. And at this moment in time, there isn't a substantial reward to be gained for exporting into the grid. So, like, if we looked at other countries and what's going on here, and we take that and we look at Ireland as again, within Europe. If you look at the UK, we'll just look at the UK. About 2 years ago, they launched a huge initiative over there to install photovoltaic. They were paying back 42 pence sterling per kilowatt hour, not alone exported, but produced from the product. Huge incentive. And what actually happened over there initially was they were looking for 150,000 installers. Now, can you imagine what that meant? A huge involvement into the workforce there. And then a huge, of course, then you had the sales and you had all that going on as well, and incentives. Now, we don't have that incentive here, unfortunately, and I would love to see, I could never understand in my business why there was a lot of support for certain technologies in the market and photovoltaic was always brushed aside. And I could never really figure that out. And the thing about it is, it's most definitely one of the products on the market that you will have the least, if any, problems with for years on end once it's actually been installed. So I don't know why we didn't get the support, and I would say that it's probably one of the only stumbling blocks that's actually left there at the moment. So we do need a bit of support there. At the moment, we're exporting power. We're getting 9 cents per kilowatt hour. We had an initiative for 10 cent top up on top of that, which was something, because at least then you were getting paid about the same price for exporting power as it cost to buy. But that 10 cent unfortunately disappeared for us in this year of in February of 2012. We'd like to see that being supported again, and we'd like to see our power companies coming back online. We'd like to see the government coming back into this here. There's a lot of talk about creating jobs and so on. We all know we need it at the present minute. There's lots of guys out there involved in electrical, roofing, and all the things that go with installing this sort of equipment. And if we had the initiative going, I think we'd have a boom. I think we'd have a boom in this energy crisis, this energy times that we're living in.
Toddy, you mentioned you installed a wind turbine out in your own house 12 years ago. Certainly one of the first ones from a micro-generation point of view that would have been installed across the country. Wind turbines, especially from a commercial perspective, are a common sight now on Irish roads today. What are your thoughts in relation to where that market is at this point?
We certainly haven't peaked by any means. We've had probably an initial burst of sales, and the products, I suppose, again, people look at the initial layout of money involved there and so on. And I think it's probably, we've a long way to go here down the road. We now have some manufacturers in Ireland producing our own products over here, and the best of luck to them. I can assure you, I hope that they create employment and so on, because that's what it's all about. But again, I suppose the times that we live in, and wind turbine is not something for everybody. You have to have very good sites. And when I say sites, wind speed sites, and sites where these machines are non-obtrusive, I suppose, to our neighbours, our friends, and that would be from noise and various things that can happen, or maybe some people take maybe a very poor view of the products as they run. So that's very important. So they're not a product can be installed everywhere. I'm quite lucky. I have a large enough site to install one where it's not bothering our neighbours and so on. So it will be limited in the small scale technology to where they can be installed and limited to the market from that point of view. However, it's a wonderful technology, because if you think the wind blows night and day, okay, and the thing is you could be generating power at any hour of the night, or day for that matter. So it's a very level amount of power being produced, whereas photovoltaic can only operate in the daytime. But the one thing I will say, and I think again going back to this, looking at Ireland on the whole, we are blessed as a nation because we have wind power, we have solar power, and by God we have hydropower. And what I'm saying is that if we care to use that technology amongst wave power and all the other things we hear about, we could actually be generating enough electricity on this island. There are about 3 to 5 million people, whatever is here. We're not a huge nation at the end of the day. We could be supporting ourselves instead of importing €6 billion worth of fuel every year. That's a lot of money going out of this country. And you know, what are we getting for it? We're burning it off in smoke at the end of the day. We could be generating that power here, creating huge opportunities for both maintenance, installation and work, and keeping that money in the country. And that's the other side of my view to this.
Have we seen a similar aspect come into this market, similar to, let's say, solar photovoltaic, in relation to the cost of the microgeneration wind turbines coming down in price?
Well, unfortunately, no, because what's happened out there is that raw materials have actually accelerated in price. So when you're looking at the product being developed, the raw materials, and that would include steel, particularly copper in the generators, these things have accelerated as an enormous price, because the Chinese market at the moment, they're purchasing a lot of this product and they're paying a lot of money for the product. So what you're ending up here is that the manufacturers here, or indeed in Europe in general, are having to pay quite high prices for the raw materials to put the machines together. So what's actually after happening there, believe it or not, is that turbines in general have increased in price, and that's a strange thing. I wouldn't have thought it would have happened, but this is what's there at the moment. So the price is increasing, and for anyone who has been lucky enough to purchase one of these products in the last 5 to 10 years, they've actually made an investment, and a very solid investment, because today if they had to buy the same products, they could be investing a hell of a lot more money into it.
Is that one of the major challenges facing the industry over the coming years, in terms of not being able to provide consumers or businesses with as good a payback as they need to make an investment like that?
Well, most certainly, people in business are no fools. And I've always said that if you're in business and you stay in business, you've a good head. You know, you see what's going on. And I think what's happening there is people are not going to go out and buy the product unless it makes viable sense. So if you look at these things, it's not just about having one these days. Everybody is down to brass tacks these days in their businesses. And what they're going to be looking at and is it beneficial to have these products from a business point of view? Does it make viable sense? At the end of the day, is it going to save me money or not? So I think this is where the manufacturers would certainly want to be on their toes and you know, looking at the viability overall. People don't just buy them these days for, it's not a gimmick in the back garden. It has to work. It has to be viable. So again, this is why I would emphasise that the photovoltaic product is good, because where the prices are with that at the moment, it's certainly viable. The wind power, although it's a wonderful technology, and certainly I would think that in the commercial game, it's a totally different ball game, because the price per watt that these things are producing at is it's certainly viable. But commercial is for commercial only, and we're not going to see a 1 megawatt wind turbines in our housing estates, because there's many risk factors involved in that. So that's not going to happen. So I would say, look, that's a small scale wind. Again, if there are people out there with an idea where to invest their money, to be very careful looking at the products that are there, whether it be wind or solar, electric, solar PV power that's there. Be careful of that. Be careful of the people that are assisting you with the install, or whoever you're purchasing the product from, to make sure that you do get the best value for it at the end of the day.
It's been fascinating speaking to you today, Toddy, and I wish you continued success with Southern Wind and Solar.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.